Hello and welcome to this AS Business Studies revision webinar with me, Graham Pryor from Tutor to You, and the topic of this webinar is on calculating profit, contribution and break-even. I thought it would be useful to start off the webinar by looking at some questions that are typical or that you may be asked on this topic. Obviously you may be asked to calculate profit or loss. You may be asked, especially for Buzz 1, a question such as what is meant by the term fixed costs, what is meant by the term variable costs, what is meant by the term revenue, what is meant by the term profit. You may also be asked to calculate total added value. This was examined a few years ago and it threw a few students because they weren't expecting it. So just be aware you may have to work out what added value is, which obviously requires a knowledge of revenue and costs. Now, even if you don't get asked a question on cost, revenue or profit, you can still use your knowledge and understanding of the topic to maybe make a calculation to support an argument you make in another question. For example, if you're asked to choose between two different locations, then if you're supplied with some numerical data, you may be able to calculate the profit of both locations to make a more informed decision. That's been examined in the past. Or you may be asked to assess whether a business will meet its objectives. And again, if there's numerical data, you may be able to calculate profit again to support any argument you make in relation to a question such as that. In terms of what you need to know, these are the key calculations. Profit is total revenue minus total costs. Revenue is price times number of items sold. And total costs is fixed costs plus total variable costs. And here's the first piece of sort of exam advice, really. It's something your teachers will have already told you this, that when performing calculations should always show you're working out. It's very, very important. That means even if you get a question wrong, for example, a numerical question wrong, but the examiner can see some evidence of understanding in your working out, you may be awarded some marks. In a recent exam paper, a profit calculation was worth 8 marks, and if candidates correctly calculated the total revenue, the total variable costs, and then went on to work out the total costs, and then attempted to calculate profit using total revenue minus total costs, but made an error in the final profit calculation, for example, maybe inputting the wrong number on a calculator or just writing the wrong answer down, they were still awarded 7 marks as long as all the other calculations were correct and shown on the exam paper. So it's really important that you always show you're working out. I thought it would be useful to put this whole webinar into a context. So we're going to look at a business called Love the Popcorn. This is a business we used at one of our recent exam coaching workshops. Now, Love the Popcorn specialise in producing popcorn with a difference, producing flavours such as sweet chili and lime and white chocolate. Now, Love the Popcorn sold 178,000 bags last year, with Waitrose being a major stockist. We're going to assume that each bag of popcorn costs 65p to make, and they sell their popcorn to retailers at a price of 94p per bag. The Love the Popcorn comes in a striped bag, which accounts for 5p of the variable costs. Yearly fixed costs are £17,680 a year, and we're going to look at how much profit did Love the Popcorn make last year. So, I've just summarised all the financial data there. That's how it may be presented to you in an exam. So we're just going to take this step by step. There's a number of ways you can work out profit. This is just one way. Obviously, use the way you are confident with. But again, we're just going to take it step by step. So the first thing you would do is you would calculate total revenue. 178,000 bags sold, 94p a bag gives us a total revenue of £167,320. Next, we work out the total variable costs. Each bag of popcorn costs them 65p to make. They've sold 178,000, so the variable costs were £115,700. From that, we can work out our total costs by simply adding on the fixed costs to give us 133,380. And finally, from that, we can work out profit, which is just total revenue, £167,320 minus the total cost to give us a profit of £33,940. Now, we're just going to make this example a bit more challenging. What we're going to do is we're going to assume that in order to improve the appearance of their product, Love the Popcorn are looking at changing their packaging manufacturer. The cost of the new bag will be 20% more than they currently pay. They estimate that this will lead to an increase in sales of 9%. Now, remember that the variable costs per bag was 65p, of which 5p was for the striped bag. Now this is not dissimilar to a question you might get in an exam where you have to manipulate and alter cost data to work out revenue and profit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work out the new sales. Now sales were 178,000. We're going to increase by 9%. So we're times 178,000 by 1.09. That gives us our new sales. Then we work out our new revenue. Obviously price is still the same, so just revenue is price times by sales, which gives us £182,378.80. Next, we're going to work out our new variable costs. Now the bag was 5p. That's going to increase by 20%, which actually works out at 6p. Added to the 60 pence, which was the variable cost minus the cost of the bag, which gives us a new variable cost figure of 66p. Our total variable costs are now 66p times by the new sales figure, which gives us total variable costs of £128,053.20. The fixed costs haven't changed. Remember, fixed costs don't change in relation to output, so they remain the same. So we just add those to the total variable costs to give us our new total cost figure. And from that, we can work out our new profit, which is, again, just total revenue minus total costs, to give us a profit of £36,645.60p. Now we're going to move on to contribution and break even. Another frequently tested topic. Again, typical exam questions. You might be asked to calculate total contribution. You may be asked to calculate break-even and changes to break-even. You may be asked to analyse and evaluate methods of reducing the break-even point. You can also use contribution to calculate profit and loss, and it's a much quicker way of calculating profit and loss, which will save you time in an exam, and that time can be used perhaps better spent on planning some of the longer mark questions. However, if you're unfamiliar with using the contribution method to calculate profit and you don't feel confident in what I'm going to explain next, use the method you're confident with, but this method is a far quicker way of calculating profit, which will save you time in an exam. So just a bit of information on contribution. I mean, the difference between selling price and variable cost per unit is not strictly profit, and that's a bit of a misconception that a lot of students make. The difference between the cost of producing a product and what the business sells it for is profit. It's actually contribution. It was recently Record Store Day, so I thought I'd use this example. A record store buys records for £8 and sells them for £12. Each record makes £4 contribution. The difference between what it buys its records for and sells them for isn't profit, because it still needs to pay its fixed costs. For example, it needs to pay its rent, its bills, might pay its staff. The £4 merely contributes towards paying off the fixed costs. Once the fixed costs have been paid, then each record contributes £4 profit. And so from that example, we can see the relationship between contribution, profit, and break even. That the difference between selling price and variable cost isn't profit, it's contribution. We still need to take the fixed costs off to find out our profit figure. So key calculations you need to know is contribution per unit, which is selling price minus variable cost per unit. Total contribution, which is contribution per unit times number of items sold. Break even, which is fixed costs divided by contribution per unit. And you can work out profit using contribution. That is the total contribution minus fixed costs. So we're going to apply that now to the example we've just looked at. So there's Love to Popcorn again. Leave that information on screen for a little bit. 178,000 bags sold last year. The popcorn cost 65p to make. Sells them to retailers for 94p, and the yearly fixed costs are £17,680. So let's just look at contribution break even, and we'll use contribution to our profit. So the contribution per unit is the difference between selling price and the variable cost. So we can see that each bag contributes 29p. That's not profit, because the business still needs to pay its fixed costs. Total contribution from all the bags sold, that is simply contribution per unit times total sales, which gives us a total contribution of £51,620. Break even is just fixed costs divided by contribution per unit. Now it's important here, it's a lot of students when they're working break even will put a pound sign in front of the answer because they're working in pound signs. It's items sold. It also makes sense to round up where you can. You can't really sell half a bag of popcorn, so you would really have to round it up. So the break even figure rounded up is 60,966 bags, and profit is simply total contribution minus the fixed costs. And we can see that gives us exactly the same profit figure that we got using total revenue minus total costs. It's a much, much quicker calculation, because all you're doing is finding out the total contribution, knocking the fixed costs off, and that also gives you profit. So again, just to continue the example, again, we'll just assume that they're going to change their packaging manufacturer, that the cost of the new bag will be 20% more than they currently pay, which is 5p. They're going to estimate which will lead to an increase of sales of 9%. So we've got the new contribution per unit, which is 94p minus the 66p variable cost. So the new contribution is 28. Now we can see the contribution has gone down. That's because the variable costs have gone up, which means that they will need to sell more bags to cover the fixed costs. The new total contribution is 178,000 times by the 1.09 to give us the new sales, which we previously worked out. Multiply that by the new contribution per unit, which gives us a new total contribution of £54,325.60. From that we can work out our new break-even point. Fixed costs don't change in relation to output, divided by our new contribution per unit, so we can see that the number of bags that need to be sold is now 63,143 bags, and we can now work out our new profit figure, £36,645.60, which is exactly the same as we got previously using the total revenue minus total costs formula. Good. Now, just moving on, you may be asked a question on ways in which a business can reduce its break-even point. For example, analyse 2 ways in which Love the Popcorn could reduce its break-even point, or Love the Popcorn believe that their break-even point is too high. What would be the best approach for Love the Popcorn to use in order to reduce their break-even point? Now, how you answer a question like the bottom one is you would analyse 2 ways in which Love the Popcorn could reduce their break-even point. There in your evaluation, you would select which you believe the best method is, and you would evaluate that method. Now, an understanding of contribution is a secret to success here. A lot of students get slightly confused when looking at methods of reducing the break-even point. There are only really a few ways you can do it. The first way is reduce your variable costs. That is going to increase the contribution per unit, and if contribution per unit is increased, it means the business needs to sell less to cover their fixed costs. They could increase the price, which again is going to increase contribution per unit, meaning less need to be sold in order to cover the fixed costs. They could do both. They could reduce the variable cost and increase the price, of course. Or they could reduce their fixed costs, meaning that, again, fewer bags need to be sold in order to cover the fixed costs, because the fixed costs are less. Questions like this, students, I have seen it where some students have talked about advertising more. That would reduce the break-even point. And that's a bit of a misconception. Advertising more might increase sales, but that doesn't mean that the break-even point would change. So just be aware of that. Advertising might increase the number of sales, but it has no real bearing on break-even point. So just finally, just to end, I thought it'd be useful to put the whole sort of thing into context here. This is another business we looked at in one of our recent exam coaching workshops, and it's a business up near, not from where I live. It's called the Tea Shed, based in Northumberland, and it was set up by Jules Quinn, who buys tea from Sri Lanka. She creates individually designed packaging, and then she sells it. She sells it across the globe, and she's planning to launch her first tea room in Northumberland. So she's looking at 2 locations: a shopping centre, and we've got some financial data at the bottom there, and a high street. So we've got this. We've got a situation where Jules is thinking of opening up her first tea room. We've got some information in the case study. We've got some numerical data there. And I'm just going to look at the question would be basically based on what we've seen, which would be the best location for Jules to set up her tea room in? Would it be the shopping centre or the high street? Now, if you were provided with any numerical data in an exam, it really is worth using that data. See if you can make any calculations to support any arguments you're going to make. Don't just quote the data there. Try and manipulate it and perform some calculations, because that's a really good way of getting good application. If you can perform calculations, then use them to support your argument. That's a really good way of gaining good application and good analysis. So we've just got that financial data there, and just from the face of it, obviously it's a new venture, so you could look at, well, actually the shopping centre might be attractive because the fixed costs are lower, and for a new business, the lower the fixed costs, the better that might reduce the risk of the new venture. If you look at the shopping centre, they've got more customers, more monthly customers. The variable cost per customer is the same. The customer spend customers spend more money in the high street. So on the face of it, you could look and think, well, actually, the shopping centre looks quite attractive. You know, fixed costs are lower, more customers, and the variable costs are the same. But let's have a look at using the data to perform some calculations. So if you look at contribution, the customers in the high street contribute more towards the fixed costs. That's because they spend more. They spend £14 on average compared to £10. If we work the break-even point out, we can see that actually the high street only needs 391 customers to break even, whereas the shopping centre requires 443 customers to break even. And we can also work out the profit. The shopping centre only returns a forecasted profit of £890 per month, whereas the high street returns a forecasted profit of £1,090. So just by using our knowledge of contribution, break-even, and profit, we've manipulated our information, and that will allow us to give a much more rigorous argument when deciding which location we should choose. So just by manipulating the data, you're going to give a much stronger argument, which is going to contribute towards good application, and that's going to open the door for good analysis. So that's the end of the webinar, and I hope you found it useful. So thank you for joining us. For more help and support on Buzz1, you can follow the Buzz1 hashtag on Twitter. You can follow Jim at Tutor2You, or you can follow myself at Tutor2You Graham. So I hope you found that useful, and thank you for joining us.